All right, welcome back, or welcome to my channel. It's Tush coming at you. You're standing outside the side of my garage where my 59 Triumph TR3A has been sitting for the last several years after being put aside in order to work on my TR250 that took quite a bit longer than I anticipated it to take to restore. Nonetheless, we're getting back to the 59 TR3A as promised. Now, I was hoping by this point in time, again it's mid-November-ish, that I would have this car in the garage, but still not there quite yet. I still have the TR6 in the garage under cover here that needs to go into storage. Most likely will go into my covered trailer for the winter, and I do have a car coming back to have some more work done on it, so need to leave one side of the garage empty. And I do have another project on the way that we'll talk about a little bit later on. However, I did want to start working on the 59 TR3A project, and I thought I would try to do that by maybe going through some of my bins. I've basically done a little bit of organization in the garage. I'm sure you can't tell, but I've done a bit of organization and brought all the bins related to my TR3 back from storage into the garage. So I've got them all basically labeled here, and in back of the welder are all TR3 bins, and these are all TR3 bins. I must be a closet MGA fan, as I actually found a few MGA bits as I was going through my bin, so hopefully we'll find a home for those if anybody needs some MG badging. So we'll send those along for free to anybody who wants them. Anyway, as mentioned, we're going to get back to the 59 TR3A, and I thought I would start on working on some of the smaller components. So on the bench here we have the heater assembly for the TR3A. So I thought I would go ahead and break this down, give it a good cleaning, give it a good painting, give it a good check over, make sure the core is good, and make it look like brand new, like we do here in the Taj Mahal. Alright, so let's take a little look at this heater that we have on the workbench in front of us. So this is from my 1959 TR3A. I believe the same heater assembly was used from the TR2 all the way up through the TR3B. I don't believe it got introduced into the TR4 range of cars. I think it switched to the a box style like the TR6, but I could be wrong. But anyway, this is definitely for a side screen car. I believe actually the heaters were optional, so this was an item that you added when you ordered the car or when you purchased the car. It does say on the heritage certificate whether the car was supplied with a heater or not. I believe most of the cars destined for the Canadian market, like my car was, came with a heater. So there you go. There's a quick look of the heater. It is a, I'm going to call a bellows style heater. And there's a few important things you need to know about this when you go about trying to test it. Alright, if you're attempting to clean or test the core, there's one thing you really need to be aware of, and that is actually a couple things you need to be aware of. Number one is the pressure. It's my understanding that these cars actually only operated under a 4-pound thermostat or a radiator cap, so 4 pounds of pressure in the system. The later cars like the TR4 went up to a 7-pound cap, so 7 pounds in the system. So it's very important not to put more than 4 pounds of air pressure through this radiator if you're trying to test the core. The other important thing to be careful of is that you don't try to either pressure test this core or even clean this core by either running water through or running some low air pressure through. You don't want to do that without keeping the straps. So there are these straps that keep this core together, and you can see them here. There are 3 of them. So there's our bands, if you want to call them. So it's important that you have these bands installed when you go to either pressure test or, rinse or clean or just blow air through it to dry it or pressure test it. It's important that these straps be on here. Otherwise, the bellows are going to expand and you're going to have a radiator core that's twice the size that you need it to be. So that's important if you're going to be working on this car, to understand that this bellows style core will expand rapidly when you put any type of pressure to it. And one of the things to make note of on my car is it actually had, and I don't know if this was an option either, but it actually had an ashtray attached here, and this is where the ashtray works. Now it is missing, these used to have a black Bakelite front with a little pattern on them. and a lot of these have broken off over the years and they are no longer available, although I think there are some people making reproductions for these. Anyway, a lot of them do not have their Bakelite fronts anymore. So just wanted to make note that there is an ashtray option underneath this rail on the right hand side, and you can decide whether you want to put that back on or not. I'll probably not add it back into the car unless I find a Bakelite front for it. I assume I could probably 3D print something or make something for it, so maybe that's an option to look at in the future. Just wanted to point that out. So for those of you who are not familiar with this heater, this is the way that it works. So there is power and ground here on the left hand side, and when you activate the fan, there's actually a rheostat. On my car, it is on the left hand side of the steering wheel, and it's very much like a dimmer switch. So it's a rheostat type style where you turn it and it increases or decreases the fan speed. The way you operate the heater, you actually have these little panels on the bottom here, and you can see them here. There's one here and one here. You can see I have good coolant. I've already drained some out, but there's always usually a little bit left in the core here. I actually have a towel down on the ground to catch that. Anyway, there are these little flaps on the bottom. This one is actually missing its handle. I believe I have an extra one of these, so hopefully I'll be able to fix this. But all you did basically is you pulled the flap open, and that opened the fan or the trap door here, where the fan would actually blow hot air into the footwell compartment. Or if you kept them closed, it would actually force air up here through these back ports to the demisters, which actually are the hosing that ran to the demisters up by the windscreen. So that's the way that the heater operated. Alright, since this core is holding coolant and it is not leaking, as you can see, I've actually had coolant in this probably sitting on the shelf now. I don't know, it's probably been 4 or 5 years since I took this out of the car, so it's actually still got nice green looking coolant inside the heater core itself. So it has not leaked out, it actually hasn't evaporated either, so I'm going to assume that this core is good. So I am not going to pressure test it. We are going to take this apart, we're going to clean it, and we're going to repaint it, but I'm not going to pressure test this. So again, you may want to pressure test yours if you believe that you have an issue as far as a leak is concerned. Again, just with the, you know, as mentioned, the 4-pound pressure testing maximum on the core. But other than that, I am not going to do that. I'm just going to assume that the core is good, and we are going to rebuild as it is. The one thing I want to do before I go any further though is I do want to test to make sure the fan actually works. So I have just a battery charger here, or not a battery charger, but a battery booster pack that I use to test my 12-volt equipment. So we're just going to hook it up, ground and power, and we're going to see if the motor activates. Okay, we just got the ground hooked up to the black, obviously, and the power hooked up to the red. And we'll just turn on the power pack here and see what happens. See if the fan actually spins. And what comes out of this is, I think there's a bunch of dirt and debris inside. So let's see what happens when we crank this up. Here we go. Oh yeah, a little bit of debris. Whisper quiet. Actually doesn't sound too bad. We'll probably see if we can oil the bearing in there once we take it apart. Let's let it blow all this other stuff out here. That actually will probably quiet down a little bit as it runs for a little bit longer. So you can also open those doors on the bottom. Watch the fingers. Oh, I can feel it getting warmer in here already. Just kidding. Alright, let's go ahead and start to disassemble this, and I'll just go about it in a fashion that makes sense to me. You may want to do it differently, but this is how I do it. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to actually, well, maybe I should talk about a little bit how this is mounted in the car first. Let me go backwards for a second. So let's talk a little bit about the mounting bracketry before I remove it. So this is the way that the heater will actually sit in the car. So this is going to be the front of the, or the dash, let's say the bottom of the dash, and this will be the bulkhead. So this little fitting here will actually go through a fitting on the bulkhead or the firewall of the car and be nutted from the outside of the engine bay. This fitting here. So this frame, this little, I guess we can call it an H frame, this will actually fit at the bottom, at the front, or at the front of the dash on the bottom. There's a couple of screws that will hold it there. And at the back, on the bulkhead or at the firewall, there's a little shelf again that these will fit into on either side. Now this bracket here, and I might be wrong, but just going from memory from my 60, I believe this bracket here holds the bottom of the glove box. There's actually a fastener that goes into the glove box there. That's my thought on that. So, again, as mentioned, this is where the hose is attached to go up to the escutcheons for the demisters for the windscreen. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Anyway, this little H-frame bracketry is affixed by these 3 7/16 nuts. So what we're going to do first is we're just going to remove the bracketry, and then we'll have a better look at the bracketry and maybe see what the ashtray looks like a little bit better once we get that apart from the actual heater core itself. Alright, let's start disassembling this little H-frame bracket. And I'm just going to hit the fasteners with a little bit of little WD-40. Just helps them to, it's not penetrating oil, but it just helps them to come off a little bit better when you're unscrewing the nuts off of the threads. So again, 7/16 ratchet, and hopefully yours are not rusted solid and they come off fairly easily and you don't end up breaking off any of the studs. So I'm sure this heater has never been apart before, so this will be the first time in its lifetime. This one's a little bit more stubborn for sure. I believe there are little spacers below this H-frame here that keep this bracket spaced up from the heater core itself. And I think this one might be stripped or broken. Let's see. Alright, let me figure out what's going on with this rear fastener. It's spinning but not coming off, so let's give me a break here and I'll come back. Okay, this rear nut is definitely more stubborn than the others, so I've just got a pair of vice grips on the bottom holding the spacer which was turning. So we're able to get the nut to turn now. We'll just go carefully. Not sure whether I'm in your way when I use my proper arm, but we'll do our best to stay out of your way, even if it means working left-handed. For some reason this rear stud wants to hold on for dear life, and Anyway, let's get another crack at it. Turn it off camera for a second and I'll readjust and go at it again. Alright, that rear fastener is giving me some trouble, so I'm wondering if it's nutted on the inside and the nut is just turning. So I think what I'll do now is I'll take off these brittle old hoses completely from the clamp. So we'll remove the two clamps to take these hoses off. Obviously we're not going to reuse these. These are probably the original hoses, and as you can see they're pretty brittle. So let's undo these two Jubilee clamps and pry these hoses off. And I think what we'll try to do now is we'll try to take the cap of the heater off, a cap of the heater core off. There's a couple of more bolts here, and we'll see what the bottom of this nut or the bottom of this stud looks like, and see if that's actually nutted on the inside or maybe spot welded. I may have broke a weld. So let's see if we can investigate that and go about it a different way, as opposed to just trying to cut this right off from the top. We don't want to try to not damage it if possible, but we'll get there when we get there. We'll get it off one way or the other, but there's a couple of different ways we can probably do this. So we'll do the hard way first. Alright, as you can imagine, after so many years, these hoses tend to get welded to the pipes along the bottom here, so I find it's easy just to take the clamps off entirely and then get a sharp X-Acto knife and carefully cut down, and I mean carefully, keep everything out of the way that you want to keep, if you know what I mean, and just slice down through the hose, and then we'll try to peel it off as opposed to twisting it off, because you might just twist off the pipe in the process. There you go. Yuck. Alright, so piping's off. Let's move on to trying to take this top cap off and see how we do. Alright, what I've decided to do now is we're going to take off these bands, the 3 bands that keep the core compressed. So we'll just hopefully be able to pry these off, and they will go flying, so watch your eyes. Okay. I thought this might just come out with the fan intact, but that doesn't seem like it's going to be the case either. So maybe I need to look at the bottom here. More coolant coming out. Of course. Take the bottom cap off. And of course that fan's not going to come out with it being on the outside of the actual core here. So I believe if I can get a wrench on that, I could be able to, or should be able to, screw this fan off. So let's have a look at doing that after we clean up our Exxon Valdez of coolant. Alright, so on the inside here there's a 9/16 nut that I believe holds the fan on. I've just loosened it, and hopefully that will allow the fan blade to just pull out. There we go. It's just like a collet, kind of like what you'd find like a Dremel, and basically that's that nut just puts pressure on it, keeps the fan attached to the drive mechanism. So there you go. There is the nut I was talking about, this brass nut. It'll actually just go on here to keep the fan on, so we'll just put that back on temporarily. Now we should be able to flip this back over carefully, and now this should be able to come out. So this should lift directly out now to reveal the core. So there's the core removed, and again, it looks to be in pretty darn good shape. Even the paint looks to be pretty good in the non-exposed areas. So yeah, I think we're good to go with that core. Obviously, if yours doesn't look so good, you may need to look for a replacement. I don't believe the replacements are available new. Not as that style. I know that Moss, for example, sells a core, but it is probably about half the thickness. Be right back. Alright, so back to where we got stuck before. So let's flip this over and see. Yeah, so there is a nut on the bottom. So that was which, I don't know if you can see this, probably not. But there is a nut there. So that was just spinning. So we'll get a wrench on that, we'll undo that, and then we should be able to undo this, this frame. Okay, we managed to get the top cover and the motor detached, and there's the one stud that was giving me issues. So if we look on the inside, you can see that they're actually nutted on the inside. There's the spacer that I was talking about on each of them. So I've just left this one here on the H frame connected, but that was the one that was giving me trouble. So we'll just leave that in there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip this over, and we're going to take off the H frame from the, this cross brace from here, and just a couple of bolts to be able to do that. So you can see them here, one here, and I'll have to slide the ashtray to get to the one over on this side. So we're just going to detach this piece from the actual arms here. Alright, a quick look at the ashtray assembly and how that works. So that gets bolted to the bottom of these rails just with one fastener here, and then I believe it picks one up at the front. And just a quick notation, this one's a dome headed to hold the rear location to the cross member, whereas the other one was like a hex headed. Let me see if I can just grab this fastener. So this one on this side, I don't know if this is correct or not, but this one was on this side. Now, who knows if this would interfere with the ashtray on this side, so they went with the dome head. I don't think so, but that's probably just something that was added later on, just so I'd take a quick note of it. There is the ashtray itself, and as you can see, we've got a couple of remnants in here, some artifacts, old pull tabs. I wonder how old those are. I haven't seen a pull tab in ages. Some of you are younger enough, you might have not recognized these at all. Also got some funds to put towards the restoration here. That is a, oh, look at that. Don't see that very often. That is a quarter, a Canadian quarter, with the Royal Ontario Mounted Police. Royal Canadian Mounted Police, I should say. I'm a little bit woozy. Alright, we're just in the process of removing the motor from the top cover. So there's just 3 fasteners here to remove. One here, and then one here, and you should be able to remove this motor completely. As far as putting it back is concerned, you can see where the wire goes through the little grommet here, so we should be able to orientate it properly when we put it back on. So otherwise I would mark it to make sure we had it in the right orientation, but I don't think we need to because of the wiring here with the grommet. Alright, so we'll go ahead and remove that. Looks like a 11/32 ratchet will do that, and we'll get those 3 off and get the motor detached. Alright, we're just doing a few things to the bottom cover piece, and that is to remove This is the little diffuser piece that fits in here. This is just a pressure fit, so I've just pried that out. Just a piece of tin that basically goes in here, just like that. Now there's this other piece that goes into the base that actually has one screw. So it's got one small screw here on the bottom. So I've just removed that screw, and then you can just pull that piece out. So now you can refinish this separately. So this looks like silver or pot metal, and then you've got this other piece that needs to be finished in black. Now you can go one step further if you like, and you can see that there are rivets here on the bottom that hold this flat piece to the bottom of this case. You could actually drill these rivets out if you wanted to and remove this bottom piece, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm just going to keep this intact, I believe. Anyway, we'll give it a good clean up and inspect it before we decide, but I think we're just going to leave that as one piece. Alright, I think what I'll do next is I'll start the cosmetic restoration of these metal parts. And in some cases we'll just scratch these down with a Scotch-Brite and repaint. But I think first what we'll do is we're going to give these a good cleaning with soap and water. So we'll take them inside and wash them down, get all the grease and grime off them. As you can see, the inside of the case is in pretty good shape. The outside's a little bit rusty, but that might just require a little bit of a wire brush. The base of this case is actually in quite good shape as well, so again we'll just give this a pretty good wash and see how it comes out. I may be able just to Scotch-Brite a lot of this before we go to a quick coat of paint, because there is very, very little surface rust or damage, if any at all, on some of these parts. So we actually got fairly fortunate as far as the condition of this heater. I've seen a lot that have been in far worse conditions. So again, first step I think will be to trip to the sink with a scrub brush and some soap and water. We'll see how these clean up, and then we'll scratch them up as best as possible, replace some grommets here for the electrical wiring to pass through, and again we'll have to replace this little pull piece once we get this painted up. But other than that, it's looking to be in pretty good shape, so we'll go ahead and we'll progress. Alright, it's the next day, and as mentioned, we did take the parts inside and scrub them down with some soap and water, so they're looking a little bit cleaner but still have some surface rust on them. So what we're going to do now is we are just going to attack them lightly. I've got sort of a sanding drum here on just my drill, and we'll go ahead and we'll take some of the surface rust off before we put a coat of primer on it, and then get it into some paint. So that's what we're in the process of doing now. We got some Miami Vice on the TV keeping us company out in the garage, and we'll go to town and derust these and get them into paint. Alright, quick update on the project. We've got the heater out, and we've got the parts painted and hanging on the line here, and we're going to let these dry before we attempt to handle them. So there'll be probably quite a few hours up here on the line. Probably get back out here this evening and see if we can actually handle them without getting some fingerprints on them. We may wait till assemble until tomorrow until they're actually quite dry to the touch. No sense rushing it at this point, so we're going to let it take its time to dry, and we'll get it back out here and do the reassembly when we can. In the meantime, what we can do is we can refinish these silver parts, and all I'm thinking of doing on these is just taking a little bit of steel wool to clean these up. This I'm not quite sure what I want to do yet. I may just actually try to clean this up a little bit better. I can actually paint this again, but I don't think I really want to, so we'll see what we want to do with that. I can take the motor apart and see what's that's looking like inside. Just clean this up a little bit, so we'll probably do that this afternoon while those parts are drying. Alright, I've decided not to take the motor apart since it works okay. All I've done is basically cleaned it up here on the back, and there's a little surface here where I've just used some 3-in-1 oil, so there's a little bearing block here at the back of the motor, and I've just dropped some oil down there, and I don't know if I can do this one-handed or not. Let's try to flip this on. It's definitely quieter than it was. So you can just hear it there. Still does make some noise, but it is going to make some noise. So anyway, I think that's better than it was, so I think we'll call that good enough, and we'll get ready to assemble this back in the actual heater unit itself. Alright guys, the parts are dry enough to handle now, so we're going to start the reassembly phase. And the first thing we're going to do is reinstall the fan motor to the top of the case, and there's 3 bolts to do that. And just remember there's these little rubber grommets that go in the actual wiper motor here to prevent some vibration. So anyway, we'll go ahead and install that now, and we'll come back in a second. Alright, we have the wiper motor reinstalled back in the top and just bolted in there, so that's looking good. We've got the wiring run through the new grommet in the top, so that's looking good as well. So we'll work on the next part, and that will be to get the core out, I believe, and then drop the motor through the core and attach the fan blade before we start to work on the bottom of the case and the top of the case. Alright, we just got it flipped over now with the core installed, and we've got the fan blade back on and tightened down, so that's looking good. So we'll get the base of the unit and to get that fixed on with the little mounting tabs that we've also painted here. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that now. Alright guys, good morning. It's now Sunday. It's quite chilly out in the garage, -3 degrees overnight here, so the paint struggled to dry in the cold garage overnight, but I think it's fine. Seems to be okay to the touch, so we'll continue on with the assembly. So we're just about in the process of replacing this pull here. I do happen to have a spare. This was sent to me from a buddy of mine named Mike, and I can't remember the exact details of this, whether I supplied one to him and he returned it, or he just found an extra spare, sent it to me. But this is way back from, I think, 2014, this note that came along with this little pull here. So we're going to go ahead and finally install it on the heater where it's required, and that's just a small little set screw, it looks like. So we'll go ahead and pop that on there and tighten it up. Hopefully it's just that easy. Alright, the new pull has been installed and it fit perfectly, which is good. So let's flip this over and take another look. We'll put the last thing I need to do is put the brackets on. So we've got them over here and just hanging, so we'll get those down and we'll fix them back on, and we'll call this heater assembly done. Alright guys, we're going to call the heater unit finished. It looks good enough to me. It's not a concourse example, but it's definitely much better than it was and good enough to put in the car. So everything operates as it should. I'm going to go through my bins now and find the demister hoses that go onto here and the escutcheons as well. I may as well keep those components together. It'll make it a little bit easier when we come to assemble the car down the line. So every little bit helps. So we'll continue to sort of go through the bins and pull components as we see fit to refinish those. So when we do get to the assembly stage on the car, it'll go much quicker. You don't have to basically stop. You'll just be able to grab what you need, assemble it, and move on to the next thing. So there you go. Heater done. On to the next project. Thanks for watching.